All right, good day, everyone, and it's a privilege to be here. Let me just start by thanking the organizers for inviting me. I want to appreciate the leadership of CSCS for this conference. I know we've been doing this for some time now, and it's good to see us take it to this very, very high level. And I also want to appreciate everyone who has contributed so far. It's been a very enlightening session. I don't know if my slide can be up. I'll be talking about the role and needs of corporates in the eye of the storm. The role and needs of corporates in the eye of the storm. And I will look at factors contributing to the storm. Of course, some of them has already been they've touched upon, and I will not spend too much time on them. I would also look at the effects of these cyber storms on corporations, and more importantly, what we can do. I understand that we have a number of companies that are represented in this place, and it will be good for us to properly dimension this. All right, so while I wait for my slide, I will just go ahead. If you look around today, there is a lot of, there are a number of factors affecting the posture of cybersecurity as well as cybercrime, from economic factors to technological factors to human factors to business factors as well as regulatory factors. Now, talking about the economy, the outlook of the global economy has deteriorated in the past few months, with over a third of the countries expecting to have a contraction in their GDP in 2022. And for Nigeria, we are not, we have our fair share of that. If you look around and you hear the news every day, it looks like it's one challenging news or the other. Unemployment rates right now is about 33%. It's also projected that there are about 95.1 million people below the poverty line. Also, inflation rates has reached 20.77%, which is the highest that we have seen since September 2005. And of course, we have the exchange rate pressures. And with the flood that's happening recently, I was listening to the news and I saw some people lamenting how they borrowed money from banks for their farms. And right now the flood has taken over their farms and they're asking, what do we do? Now, the impact of all this is that it puts a lot of pressure, and many people are now resorting to cyber crime. If you also look at technology, we're having a rapid adoption of technology across board. And like I said earlier on, can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. So if you look at technology, we have a situation whereby everyone is adopting technology. And with COVID, we have more adoption of technology. Now, all this technology, they produce data, and they are churning out data on a per second basis. We are privileged to be one of the first companies in Nigeria to have a cyber intelligence center. And from our cyber intelligence center in Deloitte, we were able to see things and happenings going on around in the world, as well as in Nigeria. I say in the world because, of course, Deloitte is in over 140 countries. Now, you realize that from the dark web that we monitor, many times there are data of Nigerians leaking to that place. People are selling them, and they're asking who wants to buy, because they have access to some guys have been able to break into servers of Nigerian companies, break into several organizations, and they're asking who wants to buy this information. And we also have, of course, with the new workforce, we have robots also working side by side with humans. All these are exposing us to a lot of vulnerabilities. Now, the human factor is also a very important area. Greed is always there. and is the biggest cyber vulnerability that has been exploited by cyber criminals. And we should not take for granted the mass emigration that we are currently experiencing. It is massive. Many companies are bleeding. I learned something new today from the DG of NIMSI, how to handle staff who are leaving. And I hope to incorporate that when I go back to my workplace, and I hope it works. Now, a lot of people are leaving, and we've seen instances that when they even leave, because where they were working before, there was no proper documentation. The things they were doing are in their head. There are some companies whereby they cannot even put on they cannot access some servers. They cannot access some systems because the person who did it left maybe 4 years ago and nobody's able to find the person. So we're having a lot of issues from the people's side. Now, there is a new trend that we're also seeing in Nigeria, which is a collaboration between insiders, people who work in an organization, and hackers. They pay people to say, just open the gateway, open the ports, just do this and give us access. And we're going to give you this particular amount of money. Or just put this ransomware in your system. Just put this flash in the system. And that is a deadly combination, because in the past, we had people at the outside, and we talked about them. We had insiders, we talked about them. Now, these guys are working together and exposing us, and it appears we have that ever-present vulnerability. Then the next one is third party and supply chain storm. We have that issue. Every one of us right now depend on third parties for network, for services. We are linked to them. And the challenge is that even third parties depend on other third parties, and those third parties depend on other third parties. And the web of dependencies, many times we don't know. And we do so much trying to take care of ourselves, but we don't know the dependencies and how we are able to address them. Then, of course, there's regulatory storm. We have several laws that are coming up. We've talked about some of them, so I won't repeat that. And there's increased costs of compliance. Then the business is at the center of all this. As the business, they are the center of all this storm. There's the economic pressure, there's technology pressure, there's the human side, there's the third party side, there's regulatory side. Now, from where I sit and stand, there's a lot that we see. One of the privileges that we have in Deloitte is that, well, Gartner rated us the #1 security company in the world, because in the last 11 years, we have been the biggest globally in cybersecurity. And that's because we serve so many clients. And by virtue of the breadth of clients that we serve, you realize that this is a pain point. Speak to leaders today of businesses, speak to CEOs of businesses, they will tell you this is what is keeping them awake at night, because they understand the other areas of their business and they're able to manage those risks, but they are not so certain that they have a thorough handle and thorough grasp of this risk. Now, the effects of this on corporation is such that it can lead to business disruption, to loss of profits, to depletion of shareholders' value, and a whole lot of them. I understand the first session took a lot of time, so I want to make this a bit short. So let me just focus on this last slide as I begin to wrap up. What can we do as we navigate the storm? I would say we should upgrade. There are upgrades that are needed, and there are 5 upgrades I want to propose. Now, when I say upgrade, when you upgrade something, you retain the best version or the best things you were doing before. You just add to it. Sometimes you do away with things that you were doing if you have a better version. And that is the kind of thing that we're looking at. The first is we should upgrade from IT-led to board-led security. I think many times we are still IT-led. Even though we say it's led by the board, even though we put it in the charter, when you look at the conversations, there is that leaning for IT to provide direction. There's that leaning for IT to lead. There are no steering committees, for instance, that are chaired by business people to discuss cybersecurity issues. Many times the CISO or the Chief Information Security Officer are not well placed in the organization. They are not senior people. These are things that are very important. Strategy, framework, processes, they are as important as technical controls. I haven't been in this for some decades. I noticed that many times when companies have issues, they keep asking, so what is the next solution we need to buy? What is the next tool? And when you hear people talk about security many times, it's always about a solution, about a tool. But you see, it's the governance that put these things together. The people put them together. Technology cannot protect us. It's people that protect us, and it's people that give us problems. So people must organize. We must come together. We must provide. Cybersecurity has to be led by the board, and also the board should get feedback on progress on a quarterly basis. There is what we call the cyber balance sheet. The same way board of directors look at financial statement and balance sheet, there is also a cyber balance sheet. You can know the health and state of your business in a one-pager. The same way you look at your financial statement in a one-pager, you can look at a one-pager that tells you the health of your systems. We need to ask for those kind of information, and we need to, have those kind of conversations, because if we don't have a snapshot of what is going on in the business, then we are led by technology. We're not led by the business, and we're not led by the board. The second is that we need to move from trust but verify principle to zero trust principle. Now, what do I mean by that? You may not be aware of this, but historically in security, we've always moved with the mindset of trust but verify. So, so we're coming in here. Let me just give an example. They assessed us, they checked us, but once we are in, many times they just leave us to flow around. they flow around. Nobody's coming to always check us. And that's the same thing with security. That's why you always say a firewall. Okay, let's put a firewall. Let's check who is coming in. Once it's fine, we allow them. People get access to system. Once they have access, they can do anything. So now we don't do trust but verify again. We do zero trust. You don't trust anyone. Don't trust any systems. You keep on monitoring. You keep on checking. You ensure that no user is deemed trustworthy. And that will require us to relook at our architecture, because historically we've built architectures on trust but verify model, and we're just trying to do add up on it. But we need to relook at the whole thing again and say, have I built a zero trust architecture? And of course, that will really help us. The next thing is, which is the third one, is to move from defensive to preemptive. Now, from defensive to preemptive. Now, what do I mean by that? I've been in this for over 2 decades, and I've seen how we have evolved. There was a time, and we're still good. What we do in security is that we look at all the various layers of security and we say, okay, how do we protect each of those areas? How do we make sure that they're very well secured? So you have the application layer, you have the database layer, you have the operating system layer, you have the people layer, you have the presentation layer, and then you look at that stack and you try to see that every area is secured with the hope that when all these are secured, then we are secured. But now, even with that, we see that the malicious persons are beating that, because there are tricks that they are coming with today that your system doesn't understand yet. So you can't work on defensive alone. Defensive is good. I give an example. We've gone to a number of organizations to do autopsy, which means after they were breached, we're trying to find out what happened, when it happened, how it happened. And in many cases, we realized that the attacker was there 6 months before. In many cases, the system picked it, that somebody came in, but because the system was looking for detection, it missed certain things. So we need to build capabilities like artificial intelligence, machine learning, which the bad guys also use, to equip our systems to help us to be able to stay ahead. I love what the MD of CSCS talked about. He talked about cyber drills. That is very important. You need to preempt. For instance, ransomware. Let's assume we are hit by ransomware today and we don't have access to this server. What do we do? A company did that recently and they tried to restore backup, only to realize that the backup is not working. They backed up and they never checked it. So if we need to do several kinds of drills. We don't see fire. We rarely see fire, but we do fire drills from time to time. But we see cyber attack every second and we don't do cyber drills. So cyber is very important. Business continuity testing is also very important. And then the next one, we need to move from system security to ecosystem security. I love the opening address by Oscar. You mentioned ecosystem about 4 or 5 times, and I was so happy because that is the next level we need to think, not just our systems. Because in the past, we just say, okay, let's protect ourselves. But you are also as weak as the weakest point in the ecosystem. If the ecosystem is being undermined, it's going to affect you. Let's take API, for example. Now we're talking about sharing, and there are a lot of APIs flying all over the place. Anytime we do assessments, we see a lot of APIs that are just there and sometimes open with access to people information, confidential information. I always ask organizations, especially those that use API, do you have an inventory of all your APIs? Do you have proper management of all your APIs? So we need to move from just our own system security. We start looking at ecosystem, and that's where the area of collaboration comes in. And I won't talk about that because I believe that's already been addressed. And finally, we need to grow, upgrade from security awareness to security education. Now, security awareness is good, and we should not stop it. But we've been doing that for the past 15 years. There are over 3.5 million vacancies in the world right now. Cybersecurity jobs exist, there are no people. We can, and in this same country, there are 33% unemployment rates. We can take advantage of this as a nation. There are things that we can do. So we need to start educating. Security education should get into our budget. The IT guys need to be trained. The people that are code, they should not just think about availability alone. Just think about confidentiality and integrity and authenticity. So we need to ensure that we educate and keep on educating our people and teach them beyond just awareness to get to the next level. Thank you very much for that. And on that note, I think I'm still below time. I would hand over to Ike.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aladenusi. We appreciate you. And like I did the first time, I'd like to ask you to stay with us as we're going to move to our panel. All right, please join me in welcome our first member of this panel. He's helping with cybersecurity operations. He's formerly worked with SG, Warburg, and KPMG. He worked with a company back then that was called Coopers and Lybrand and is now PwC. He's he's coming to us online, by the way. He founded Thomas Murray, a company that now has a presence in over 100 countries in the world. And he's the founder of that. Please put your hands together for Executive Chairman of Thomas Murray, Mr. Simon Thomas, who's joining us virtually. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Good. Checking to make sure that we had sound and that you were there. Thank you.
That's good of you. Thank you very much for inviting me to your conference. It's good of you. I mean, obviously, Nigeria is a very powerful country, and of course, it makes you a target for hackers. Thomas Murray, have had a close relationship with CSCS for many years as part of our risk assessments of financial market infrastructures, banks, and other groups.
Next to join our panel, he's a Deputy Director Comms for the Office of the National Security Advisor. He's a research fellow for the Energy Research Institute for the University of Leeds. He is a manager, Computer Emergency Response Team. He's a PhD holder. He's Colonel Bala Fakandu. Please put your hands together as you make him welcome to join us on the panel. I love how our armed forces and the officers of the armed forces are showing themselves to be astute in many areas and more than just, the combatant defense. Well, also supposed to be here is the CEO MTN Nigeria, Mr. Carl Olatogun Toriola. Unfortunately, he's unable to be here, but he sent us someone who might even be more appropriate for this panel, the Chief Information Officer for MTN. Please put your hands together for Soyinka Sodunke, Mr. Soyinka Sodunke, who's joining us. He's got a background in formulating business strategies and technology, mitigating operational risks. So like I said, he's quite apt for this panel. And joining our panel as well, Chief Information Officer for Airtel Nigeria, Oluwaseun Solanke. Please put your hands together for Mr. Oluwaseun Solanke, who's coming to join us. He's a technology executive, a practitioner. He's skilled in digital strategy and execution and responsible for IT, cybersecurity, digital labs that Airtel brings to the nation in Nigeria. Please put your hands together for him. Mr. Oluwaseun Solanke, also joining us with over 2 decades of experience in information security working across Nigeria. Please welcome the Chief Information Security Officer for UBA PLC, Romerick Sia. Please put your hands together as he comes forward. We've got, this is a very tech-savvy panel that we have here. Next, joining this panel is the MD Cyberdome, Chioma Uagwu. Please put your hands together as she comes up. She's a leader with a distinguished career in digital, financial services, and cybersecurity industries, respectively. So we welcome her to our panel. We welcome our entire panel. I'm going to hand over to our moderator, Mr. Temitope Aladenusi, and I'm going to ask that he somehow manages to keep the time to about 15 minutes. Good luck, sir.
All right, thank you very much. And I want to welcome our distinguished panelists once again. I think I've already set the context. All right, so Chioma, let me start with you because there's so much focus on you today. All right, as someone who's been in this field and you understand the requirements in terms of skills, how do we bridge that cyber skills gap that we have today, especially in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. And once again, I want to say happy Silver Jubilee to CSCS. Yeah, just to delve right in, because I know we do not have much time on our side. So I've listened to everybody speak here today and I'm like, so my job is done. Basically, we begin to look at cybersecurity from a business angle. Before, we thought that you only need to be a blue chip company to be attacked, but it's different. From the attacker's perspective, cyber attacks are being very, very heavily sponsored by state actors. We know that. It's even become very profitable. It's become very easy through, we've seen shift in mallops, ransomware as a service, malware as a service. And like someone say, you are strong as your weakest link. That is where skills, expertise, exposure, experience comes in. So I like the fact that I'm sitting next to Colonel Ubala Fakando, and there's so much to be done in the field of cybersecurity with the view to building the skills gap. It all rests on 5 pillars. For the sake of time, I'm just going to gloss over them. First is technology. We know that there is need for us to deploy and implement very smart next generation technologies that enable automation, that are AI driven and allow machine learning. But again, we know that technology is insufficient. That is where methodology comes in. So in holistic cyber, there's something that we call OFM, which is offensive framework methodology. Someone said here, I think as the first speaker, who said for you to catch a thief, you have to understand how his mind works. So from our angle, you should know how to attack as a defender with the background of an attacker, and that requires skills. We move to constant innovation. Again, the cyber domain has been heavily weaponized, and we continue to see change in dynamics and all of that. So that goes to show that we have to create a pool. We have to ensure that our solutions programs are very dynamic and are quick to adjust to the current trend of cyber attacks out there in the wild, while paying attention to the business logic, imperative, objective of the business. Then collaboration. We talked about collaboration here and cooperation. That stands on collaboration between the government, the academia, and the private sector. It cannot be overemphasized. It is paramount. Colonel will tell us how we're going to build a relationship where we've talked about creating a pool or a succession where with this JAPA experience, which everybody knows, as the lead, how do we create a succession or a cyber ninja ecosystem where we're able to replace these people at the speed of light? Quite frankly, I've been to a couple of organizations where you come in and they tell you the 16 people resigned today from the IT department. We don't have a chief information security officer. We don't have this one. So it is the new world order, whether you like it or not. So we have to look at this and give it the push it deserves. Then ultimately capacity building, which is key, by the way. The Cyberdome Cyber Academy, of course, is an ATC with the EC Council, which we know. But basically what it does is we try to push for technological advancement, bearing in mind that it is digital transformation. So there is need for us to build curriculum, help to identify skills. For those who are currently in the profession, we try to assess and enhance their skill, train them, provide international certification, as well as try to see how we can improve on what they're currently doing by way of directing them. Ultimately, these courses could also be customizable because, like someone rightly says, everybody here has the internet in his pocket, whether you like it or not. And everything could be vulnerability. So there is need for us to continue to extend this conversation to see how we can get the public sector, the government, the cybersecurity professionals and luminaries to come together, and let's see how we can further the conversation, create a gene pool of cybersecurity experts and professionals, as well as introducing a national institution of cybersecurity education plan, which I believe Papa Kando is going to speak to it. So basically, we're looking at inclusion. Cybersecurity is a team sport. We're equally looking at including cybersecurity in educational curriculum. We're looking at driving innovation and R&D, including the academia, providing international certification, collaboration between the private and public sector, as well as creating regional hubs where the interaction or collaboration within nations, I believe the NCERT or CSERT or CSOC, whatever, would sit and be able to catalog and share information that can assist and aid local businesses. Then ultimately, let's try to drive cybersecurity as a culture in our workplace.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we please celebrate that? That was really very good. I will go to Mr. Oluwaseun right now. She talked about business objectives about 3 times. And the reason why we are all doing this is not because we want to have people that have experience, it's because of the business. So how do we incorporate cybersecurity as part of business strategy?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations again to CSCS on their 25th anniversary. Thank you for putting together this initiative, very laudable effort. I think as to the question and what my colleague was talking about as it pertains to cybersecurity in business, I think it's essential to have cybersecurity as a core part of the overall business strategy. It shouldn't be just about sales numbers, but you have to start looking at the brand identity as well of the organization. And cybersecurity plays a very key role when you talk about the potential for that business going into the future. You start looking at some key trends and indices in the market, how to protect that business from being hacked by external factors, how to protect the brand and identity of the business itself. And it becomes very important then to integrate cybersecurity at the board level, right? So just like you had mentioned, it should be board-led, not IT-driven. And this is where we start talking about what is the role of cybersecurity in the overall strategy of the business going forward. How does the business itself incorporate cybersecurity into its culture within the organization? Is it security education, security awareness? Do they know the right things to do in a situation where someone gets hacked? How do you put preventive measures into place or preemptive measures so that you're doing proactive defense as opposed to reactive measures. So I think all in all, when we talk about cybersecurity, it's now a fundamental aspect of every discussion. There should be an executive risk framework applied at the board level. The discussions should be had with universal, non-jargon, meaningful type terms. It should be quantitative in the way it's defined, so that the board does understand the importance and the role that cybersecurity plays in the organization going forward. And that also allows the organization itself to invest more money towards protecting the infrastructure, protecting intellectual assets, protecting companies' data, protecting the customers' data, and just basically taking the organization into the future. Thank you.
All right, take us to the future. Can we please put our hands for him? So in taking us to the future, this would require some costs. And I want to come to you, Colonel Ballard, now, because this is one issue I face as a consultant. Board of directors always ask me the question, how much is enough? We are spending a lot of money. So how do we know we have spent enough? So from your own perspective, how do we bridge that cost gap as we go, to achieve cybersecurity?
Thank you very much. And thank you for having us in this panel. For me, in bridging costs for companies or enterprise, I think it's hinged on 3 elements for me. 1, public-private partnership can help. 2, maybe if you have a robust policy or framework from the government. 3, collaborative efforts within entities. These 3 things I'm going to. Now, for public-private, for the in policy framework or strategy, we need to have a comprehensive policy to actually drive cybersecurity to ensure that these things get to the entities with minimal cost. How do I mean? Is one thing having the policy itself. The approach to implementing that policy also matters, because if you can't implement it properly, it's useless. Let me give you an example. We'll have a typical example from our office. We recently developed, in collaboration, as part of initiative to drive the national cybersecurity policy and strategy, we developed toolkits for small and medium enterprises. Because the SMEs are entities on their own, but it's difficult for them to have that budget to protect themselves. So it's very difficult to do that. So in the approach in protecting the SMEs, we collaborated with FCDO, that's a Foreign and Commonwealth Office UK. We developed toolkits, which we launched in, we did a pilot launching in February, and we did the full launching in April this year. And it is having a huge impact on the protection of infrastructure and how they do their businesses for these SMEs. And who is driving it? We've got a private sector to drive it. So with that, it has reduced the cost of them, getting to actually secure their infrastructure, secure their systems because of the high cost. That's one. Secondly, public-private partnership. How do I mean by public-private partnership? You can partner with the government to see how you can reduce costs on some of the things. Let me give you an example. We have National Digital Forensic Laboratory, now, which are actually utilized by the law enforcement.
If the office is planning to develop the capacity of the staff actually carry out some forensic investigation that entities forensic investigation based on our collaboration of the private sector that entities can utilize to reduce their costs, because it takes huge cost to actually get forensic investigators to investigate cyber expenses within companies. I know I'm talking about because I've had quite a lot in so many things that tell me how huge that is. Then thirdly, I talked about collaboration between entities. For instance, we have have
visualization on their infrastructure, to reduce cost, overall cost. So that kind of solution can be spread. All of them can use that solution. So that's a collaborative entity between entities. So when they have that, it reduces cost to the barest minimum, because some organizations are actually strong in terms of cost. Some might have lean resources, but when you have that collaboration, it actually reduces the cost, basically.
Wow, thank you. Can we please put an answer for him? So we talked about collaboration, and he saw it from the cost perspective. I will come to Mr. Shoyinka now. Now, we've heard about collaboration a lot today, and apart from the cost perspective we talked about, I believe there are other benefits of this collaboration, information sharing. From where you sit, and I know you sit in a place where you have seen a lot of collaboration, what are some of the importance of information sharing within the industry? And if there are some examples you can also share, that would be good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Tope. And as well, I would like to congratulate the CSCS on their 25th anniversary. Look, I think it's a very important points that we're discussing today around collaboration. Organizations need to start understanding that it's not a problem that you can solve alone. Yeah, it's something that will require an entire ecosystem, and I've heard the term ecosystem being used here from a lot of the speakers that have spoken today. So there needs to be that collaboration, but on top of that, there needs to be that mindset shift. Yeah, for us to start understanding that the criticality of cyber attacks. Statistics show that yearly we're seeing a 50% increase in cyber attacks that we're beginning to see today. And there's certain barriers that exist today in terms of that collaboration, and it's around the jurisdiction, it's around the cross sectors, it's around regulation. And I think one of the speakers or one of the panel members here did mention about the fear of people that have been hacked actually putting it out there. And I think that's where the regulation needs to come in terms of how do we regulate better, or how does regulation regulate better where it's not seen as the traditional policeman where they're waiting until something happens before they go after you. But what policies do they have to put in place which in terms of governance sits in the middle and allows people to ensure that collaboration happens even before something happens in there. So I think there's the need for that collaboration because of the size of the problem in which we're dealing with. But again, the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning tools, I think these are things again that can actually ease that collaboration, because when you look at the phases that are required within cybersecurity, which is things around your identification, your ability to be able to identify the sort of business that you're in, your ability to be able to respond, your ability to be able to detect, and those two phases, which is your ability to be able to detect and respond. I think those are the key phases in which, when you've gone through your strategy, how do you detect? And this is where your artificial intelligence, but on top of that artificial intelligence, what amount of data do you have? And that amount of data is based on the extent of collaboration and the amount of information that you can source from various organizations, apart from your own organization, the amount of organizations that you can, information you can put together to allow your artificial intelligence, your machine intelligence to be able to predict, because you're not in an era where it's reactive. You have to be able to predict what the sort of threat actors are capable of doing. Thank you.
Wow. Can we please put hands together for him? So I like that you say predict, detect, and respond. So I'll come to Romaric. Romaric, from where you sit, you see attack from at least 22 countries across the world as a CISO from UBA. How can we prepare for our next cyber attack?
intelligence.
Because I remember Major General said that everybody will be hacked. So how do we get ready for that?
Thank you very much, Topwe, for this question, and congratulations to CSCS. And also thank you for the invitation. I think the paradigm has shifted, and the ecosystem has to also acknowledge that and also change the ways and in their approach to cybersecurity and cyber defense. Just to remind the community, in 2011, the CEO of the biggest security organization in the world declared that in the current state of things, breaches are inevitable. And in a security forum like this, it caused like some fear that somebody would say something like that. He actually went on to repeat it so that it can marinate in people's mind that things have changed. That same organization got breached in 2019, by the way. Things have changed in such a way that let's just realize something. Everybody has a phone, right? That phone barely comes with a manual. So you get a device out of the box and you have to know how to use it out of the box. And nobody is told that we should not trust whoever we're talking to through those devices. And we're Africans, right? We welcome people, we're good with each other, right? That's our culture. We apply that also even more when it comes to technology. That's why the prevalence of scamming and cybercrime in Africa is so high, so elevated. You ask a very good question, which is about cybercrime and the way it happens in Africa. It's going to continue to happen. How do we then preserve ourselves? We have to adopt new ways. You know, we used to sit, just for what you mentioned in your career and your experience, we used to sit in our offices and we wait for an incident to happen, for that to be picked up, and then we start running helter-skelter, right? We have to now invest in threat intelligence. And we are in no means in the business of substituting ourselves from law enforcement agencies. But then again, we need to know ahead of time if nation-state actors like North Korea, Russia, China, that are more and more interested in Africa, because if you take what is happening to Russia today, they need to find resources. If you take what is happening to North Korea, where they are under financial sanctions, they have to finance the nuclear program. And the best way for them to get money is to hack organizations, especially in our region. 2020 alone, they made about $6 billion just through hacking. No commodity sale, just through hacking. And for some of them, they became service providers for hacking for other people as a service. A big name that came recently is Hush Puppy. You can find out. He had tight ties with the North Korean agency. So how do we stay ahead of this? We have to invest a lot more of what's going to happen in 3 months, 6 months to come. Because it's just like a disease, right? It's just like a virus, like COVID. Hackers have a way of behaving. And those behaviors can be learned. And those behaviors, by the way, are sold as a service, like somebody mentioned earlier, on the dark web. So in anticipation, when we tap into those forums, we're able to understand that in particular attack that happened to an entity, even though we are not so-called a big entity, or somebody was saying we don't have data that is important, I think data is always important. We don't give the right value to data. In April 7th, whatever happened to a betting company in Nigeria here has shocked almost everybody. But it was executed by the biggest Russian company, the biggest ransomware organization, which is Russian on the planet. But it came to hit an organization based in Lagos, based in Nigeria. I believe that after that, what happens is that people have to learn more and more to look forward than just to wait for what will happen before they can now respond to it. But anticipation, threat intelligence, and allows us to project ourselves to the future.
Thanks. Thank you. Can we please put on together for him? Anticipation, threat intelligence. Simon, I have not forgotten you. I will come to you now. And I would like you to tell us how, given your experience working with a number of African businesses, what should African businesses do to reduce the cybersecurity challenges that we face?
Thank you very much, and thanks again to CSCS for inviting me. Look, I think a couple of things just to flag. I think what we see is that obviously the digital infrastructure is booming across Africa, driven largely by mobiles. I think that the issue there, of course, is that the underlying collection and use and protection of that data is lagging a long way behind. So that's a major issue. There's clearly a lack of effective, cost-effective cyber risk exposure monitoring tools. I think that's a major issue that is out there. I think effective action to combat cyber fraud is probably lacking. I mean, if you're looking at Nigeria, you've got very good regulations, but actually probably the cybersecurity profession is arguably in its very nascent form. So it's in very early stages and needs to develop further to be more effective in protecting Nigerian businesses and other African businesses. I think one of the things that we also see is that a lot of businesses, it's not just an African issue, it's probably a global issue. They don't define what's normal. And if they don't work out what's a normal way to process their data and their other information, then they're going to find it very difficult to actually monitor unusual behavior. And often one of the problems is because you haven't got an idea of what's normal, you can't easily identify and action security threats that are identified. Integrated networks. I think one of the issues is a lot of trending has been towards integrated networks. Of course, the problem with that is it's much easier for hackers to move through integrated networks. So we'd suggest segregating those networks wherever possible, front, back offices, that kind of thing. I think the other observations we'd make are that there's a lack of transparency. I think there's got to be a greater willingness to actually notify and communicate incidents. I think that arguably a central repository around that would be quite interesting, rather like SWIFT has in Brussels. There's a lack of acceptance that by businesses that actually have a problem. They prefer to sweep it under the carpet, and I think that's obviously an issue. Speed of response is a common problem. Again, it's not limited to Africa, but obviously if it takes weeks to actually respond to a breach or a hack, then you are going to lose money in some scale probably. So that is a huge issue and needs to be worked on. Investing in good teams, cyber teams. I mean, I think business is going to have to accept that they are going to have to hire people, train them, and they're likely to find trouble retaining them. But at the end of the day, it's something they can't do without. So positively managing cyber risks, I think it's going to be absolutely critical. It's not actively done, as we've heard at the conference today. I think it's got to change where you put an active monitoring regime in place and employ, experts to actually test those arrangements. So, investing in tried and tested capabilities is going to be key. And I think at the end of the day, it's about people, and it's about training people across the continent to understand what phishing is and what other issues are, and just become more and more aware of cyber vulnerabilities. So thank you very much.
I agree. It's very key. We did an assessment recently. We sent out fake emails to, let's say, biology, and why is it please? And this is to develop awareness. So please add examples to awareness sometimes. All right, I'll go to Mr. Shoika.
All right, thank you very much. I think for me, I like the way Judge Samad put it in terms of him referring to the physical kidnaps and the way we need to start looking at our own internal system from a cybersecurity perspective. It's a profitable business as well, just as it is on the physical side. So it is profitable, and we need to understand that. The second one is about zero trust. So not just to trust everyone, but trust nothing. Yeah, there's a shameless trust nothing. Not just anyone, but even your trusted devices in which very trusted in which we saw the attack using SolarWinds, which was an upgrade, and by that they were able to introduce software into it, which became a threat. And so trust nothing. You need to relook at the entire architecture and build a new sort of architecture, and the frameworks out there right now to help with that. I think that we will be in terms of sorry, I've lost my chain of thought. But I think those two things are quite critical in terms of trust no one, but just not trust no one, trust nothing. And then the first one, which I mentioned, is in terms of the sort of attractiveness of ransomware at the moment right now. So I think we need to understand that, and everybody needs to align with that.
All right, so beware of cyber kidnapping and trust no one, even your wife, your husband, and everyone. All right, Romaric, over to you.
Thanks, Dope. I like what the Major General said earlier this morning. I think we need to go back to the basics. We are in a society that is becoming more and more digital. We become digital citizens, so I think we need to know our roles and responsibilities. Nigeria is one of the very few countries in Africa that have legislation and regulation. He mentioned about the framework that was released, and I believe it's available on the internet, that we all need to read and understand what we need to do. A question was asked earlier: if something happens, what do you do? Even in corporations, after days after the incident, we still don't know what to do. So we need to shift our mindset, change our habit, and just go to the basics and learn what the law has prescribed and obey to that.
All right,
Thanks.
Thank you so much. And finally, I'll call on Mr. Sholanke.
Okay, I think for me, it's simple. One, we need to be intentional about cybersecurity. It has to be built into the corporate strategy, board, executive level, and then drive that through the organization as a culture. The second is be proactive. I think you had talked about cyber drills, or someone had mentioned about that. It's very critical for you to continually test the infrastructure. Shoyinka talked about zero trust. So if you start from that perspective, then it keeps you on your toes and ensures that the organization is not breached. And then the last is, obviously, you have to educate. It's not just about awareness, but also ensuring that everyone in the organization understands cybersecurity. Keep it very simple. Use universal terms so that everyone understands and everyone can buy into the importance of cybersecurity. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. As we wrap up, just to summarize, this panel have offered very valuable insights. And we say we should start from the business strategy. What are we trying to achieve as a business? And based on that, you have a cybersecurity strategy that talks to your business strategy. And that strategy should address things like framework, things like policies, things like culture, things like awareness, things like technical, technical controls. And in putting this thing together, don't forget, zero trust. Don't trust anyone. Now, once you have done that, have capabilities that preempts, not just wait to detect, you preempt, and then you're constantly checking and seeing what's happening to others and preparing before it gets to you. And then you also detect and look for ways to come back when you have issues. Just because Simon, I missed him the last time. Sorry, Simon, I want to bring him just to wrap up for us. Simon, can you please just help us to wrap up this session by giving us some of your parting advice to everyone on what we can do to stay ahead as far as cybersecurity is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I would just encourage, sort of vigilance and, actively tracking and these risks with suitable monitoring tools, which can help you put in place remedial action well ahead of arguably you being hacked. And I think there are these tools that are emerging. You don't have to spend the kind of monies you get out of BitSight and security scorecard of people. So I think there are lots of ways to improve the internal security of your organizations. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to us. And on this note, we'll hand over to IK.
Thank you very much. Please join me and appreciate my panel. I'd like to ask them to take a group photo, so don't run away from us just yet. Please, photographers, if you will coordinate that. So just appreciate all of them one more time for their phenomenal presentation. And we thank especially Mr. Simon Thomas online who joined us, but he can't be in the photo. Right.